Wow. Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay, here to talk a little bit about Pope Leo the 14th. As you guys know, a couple of days ago, he was elected the brand new Pope of the Catholic Church, the new pontiff, replacing Pope Francis. And his name is Robert Francis Prevost, but he's chosen the name Pope Leo the 14th. And he's a history making pope in that he is the first American pope. He's the first pope who is a native to the United States. Just like Pope Francis was the first pope from the Americas, this pope is the first pope not only from the Americas but from the United States, which means a whole lot in terms of history because we talked about how the United States, being that it was an English colony, was initially antagonistic to the Catholic religion, resistant to Catholic immigrants, resistant to the Quebec Act. When Britain gained control of Canada after the French and Indian War, you had the French Canadian citizens who were Catholic, and the debate was there: was the British Crown going to give them legal rights like other British citizens, even though they were Catholic? There are laws written into the well, not written into, but um, in the English common law constitution that says that the monarch of Great Britain cannot be a Catholic. Britain is very much, or was very much, an anti-Catholic nation, and the United States, even after um, the War for Independence in 1776, and then the end of the war in 1783, carried on that tradition of being anti-Catholic. So, and the idea that we elected a Catholic president in 1960, uh, JFK uh, was something of a shock to many, even as late as 1960. So, the country has had a history of anti-Catholicism. So, for an American to be a pope is something of um, great history making ramifications. But a little bit into why that is. Of course, like I said, the British heritage, anti-Catholicism, Protestant heritage of the United States, but also because the United States is a democracy, and the Catholic religion, as it was practiced over the centuries, is anything but. Vatican City in itself is a theocracy. They believe that God's rule reigns over the rule of popular sovereignty. So, part of the reason why the founding fathers and later subsequent generations, hey, what's going on, David, were afraid to allow so many Catholics or allow Catholics to obtain high political positions was because they felt that if they have to submit their authority to the Pope, then the Pope would ultimately control or intervene in American politics. And that would, of course, be a conflict of interest: his loyalty to the church or his loyalty to the Constitution and to the institutions of the United States. And that was never really an issue before, but now it will be, considering that Pope Leo is an American. And not only is he an American, he is a progressive American. On the American political spectrum, Pope Leo the 14th is a liberal. He chose the name Leo after Leo the 13th, who was called the social pope. He was pope in the latter half of the 19th century, in the early part of the 20th century, and He was very much involved in a lot of uh, labor movements for the people, for the common folk. So this pope is now taking on that mantle, and also the mantle of his immediate predecessor, Pope Francis, who was considered, like I said, the woke pope. But Pope Francis was a citizen of Argentina. Pope Francis didn't have any ties to the United States. This pope does. So it'll be interesting to see over the future if this pope's political opinions, as it pertains to things such as uh, immigration, especially, clash with the current political regime that we now have in Washington. Immediately, some of his old tweets were dug up, particularly during 2020 when you had the George Floyd controversy, the COVID vaccine mandate controversy, and other controversies. Um, Trump's policy with regards to El Salvador and his teaming up with a Salvadorian president, Nayib Bukele, um, which the Pope has come out against. So I foresee a lot of clashes between uh, the Pope and the president over the next at least 4 years and maybe 8 years if J.D. Vance is elected in Trump's place in 2028. So uh, let's get down to who he is. Robert Francis Prevost was born on September 14th, 1955, at Mercy Hospital in Chicago, Illinois. His mother, Mildred Agnes Martinez Prevost, was born in the 7th Ward of New Orleans. She is from a New Orleans Creole family that moved to the Chicago area. So, again, this ties into another video that we talked about before, Sinners. Recently, we did the movie review on that, the Michael B. Jordan film, where we talked about that there are individuals, a specific ethnic group, a specific ethnic group in New Orleans, Louisiana, that is called French Creole people. And basically, these are people of mixed race heritage, usually African, Native American, and Caucasian, usually French, that settled in Louisiana, but sometimes could be Spanish. Seems to me that by her last name, his mother was of Spanish descent, maybe Spanish and French descent, because unlike other parts of the United States, Louisiana was initially colonized by the French, by the Spanish, and then, of course, by the French, and was a French territory and protectorate until 1803 with the Louisiana Purchase. So, with that being said, his family traces their lineage back to that. And during the Great Migration, which is the migration of people of black people from the South, escaping Jim Crow, because yes, Creole people, and the name Creole actually comes from the Spanish language. When Spaniards started to settle in the New World, they wanted to distinguish between those people born in Spain, they were called peninsulares, and those people of European descent that were born in the colonies called criollos. Over time, though, the word criollo, or translated into French Creole, came to mean somebody that was a unique blend that was native to the Americas. So that's where the word comes from. So basically, it indicates someone of mixed heritage, particularly French heritage or Spanish. His father Louis Maurice Prevost, uh, that was born in July 28th, 1920, and died on November 8th, 1997, was a U.S. Navy veteran of World War II who commanded an infantry in the Normandy landings. So, of course, the Normandy landings is something that we've spoken about as well. That took place in June of 1944 when Allied troops liberated France and basically all of Europe from the Nazis. So Pope Leo's dad was involved with that. He later became the superintendent of Brookwood School District 167 district. Previous has two older brothers, Louis and John. It goes into his grandparents. Okay, on his father's side, his father's grandparents were French and Italian descent. They were from Turin. They were from northern Italy. Uh, a French woman, so he has a lot of French ancestry on both sides here. And but his mother's grandparents, of course, very unique. Like I said, from Hispaniola, a mixed race woman from Hispaniola. So this is interesting because some of those French Creoles, they didn't immediately come. They didn't immediately come from. Uh, they didn't immediately come from automatically France. Some of them came by way of Hispaniola. Now, what is Hispaniola? Hispaniola is the island in the Caribbean that comprises the modern day nations of the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And of course, the French side was Haiti, and the Spanish side was the Dominican Republic. But after the Haitian Revolution of 1794 to 1804, the Creole or the mixed race, upper class, and the petit blanc, the white and the mixed race upper class, is left Haiti and moved to uh, Louisiana, the United States. So it appears that his uh, his maternal ancestry goes back to that. Her her mother's name, her his maternal grandmother's name was Louise Banqui, and she was a black Creole. So a black woman with French ancestry again, because what was considered black in Hispaniola or Haiti, which was Hispaniola was the colonial name of Haiti given to both Haiti and the Dominican Republic when it was colonized by Columbus, as like Little Spain. Then they had something called the Treaty of Ryswick. In 1697, which split the island up in two. France got some and Spain got some, and France's half became way more prosperous because of the importation of African slaves. And then there was a rebellion led by Toussaint Louverture, where the slaves, the Africans, overthrew it. Uh, and of course, that would make some of the mixed race people very uncomfortable, such as the Pope's family. You know what I mean? Because I mean, there were different levels in French society, in French colonial society. There were different levels of, misogynation. They were under a different set of rules than English society. English society basically was governed by the one drop rule. If you had one drop of African blood, you were considered African, but not so in in French colonial possessions, Portuguese colonial possessions, or Spanish colonial possessions. There were degrees to it. You know what I mean? So when the revolution broke out in 1804 with the Afro Haitians, some of the mixed race people probably felt a type of way and just were like, okay, we're going to go to a different French colony in the Americas. We're going to go to Louisiana, and that's probably what happened with his family. You know what I mean? So very interesting history, and very interesting how it intersects with American history. Because then, okay, they're leaving France. They're leaving Haiti to go to France, what they consider as New France, Louisiana, right? But no sooner than that happens, Napoleon sells Louisiana to the United States with Thomas Jefferson as the president. So now they're under a new law. Now they're under the English system, the English/American system of the one drop rule. So a lot of these Creoles who back in their homeland, or either in their homeland in Haiti or in Louisiana itself, when it was under French rule, they wouldn't be considered on the same level with black people. Now that they're under American law and English law, they are considered black, because the two laws are different. You know what I mean? Take, for example, Homer Plessy. Homer Plessy is a perfect example. Many people have heard of Plessy versus Ferguson, the famous court case that basically established modern segregation in this country, like put it into law. It was in the 1890s. This case involved a man, Homer Plessy, who was of Creole descent, who was basically he could pass for white. He was that mixed raced because he was Creole, right? He had a large portion of European DNA in him, or maybe some Native American DNA or whatever. He wasn't completely African. So you wouldn't be able to tell he was African on his face, much like the Pope, right? But he still was told he had to leave. And because of this, they took it to the Supreme Court, and it was established by the Supreme Court then that the two races had to be legally separated. It wouldn't be able to work. It wouldn't have not been able to work with someone who was phenotypically African or phenotypically black, because of course they would be able to tell that they were black, and they wouldn't they wouldn't be allowed to sit on the bus with white folks. But it's somebody that could blend in, they wouldn't be able to tell, and it worked. Other famous Creole people, Louisiana Creole people, Beyonce's mom is another example. Beyonce grew up in Houston. Of course, Houston, Texas is right next to Louisiana. Especially East Texas is very much influenced by Louisiana culture. And Jelly Roll Morton, many people consider to be, if not the founder of jazz, one of the forefathers of jazz music. Yes. So being from Chicago, he's a White Sox fan. That's absolutely correct. But he has a very other interesting part to him as well. Besides his American heritage, is from the United States, he also is a citizen of Peru. He moved to Peru in 1985, and basically during Peru's, oh, you're a Knicks fan, David? During Peru's era of political upheaval from 1980 to 2000, there was a man in Peruvian politics named Alberto Fujimori, who was basically a dictator. And this Pope, during the time that he was working with the Catholic Church, stood up against this man. You know what I mean? Stood up against uh, the dictatorship of Alberto Fujimori. This is basically called the lost decade of Peruvian history because this man was so brutal. And I know David will appreciate this because David is always talking about dictatorships, particularly Marxist Leninist dictatorships. And there are a lot of them in Latin America. Latin Americans seem to be, for some reason, sometimes emboldened by liberation theology, sometimes not. They seem to be very attracted to Marxist Leninist type of thinking. You know what I mean? But this Pope fought against both neo-fascism in Fujimori and the Marxist Leninist mobs in Peru. So he went to Peru, and he not only went there to preach the gospel, but his idea of the gospel was using it to help people, using it to fight for indigenous rights, because Peru is a lot like other parts of Latin America. Again, there is that caste system in Latin America because Latin Americans are majority a mixed race society. Mestizos in Spanish is the word. There is social degradation based on phenotype and skin color and social class, right? So there, when the indigenous people, with the native people of Peru, remember how Peru was, in ancient times, Peru was part of the Inca Empire. And then the Spanish came in the 16th century and overtook it, right? And destroyed it and enslaved through the encomienda system all of the native population, those who speak Quechua, those who speak Aymara, the native languages of Peru. Many people in countries such as Peru and Bolivia, they still speak these languages, but these people live in disparate conditions. So a lot of these folks, a lot of these indigenous folks, people of Amerindian descent, native descent, reach out to institutions such as the Catholic Church to help them and to speak on their behalf to the government, right? So he fought against anti-indigenous racism in his adopted country of Peru. So I give him props for that. So obviously this guy is very much a radical egalitarian. He has experience using his platform to fight against dictatorships like Fujimori's dictatorship and like the racism and Marxist and Leninist ideologies in South America. I always found that Peruvian thing with Fujimori very unique because at first, when I didn't know about the large influx of Japanese immigrants to Peru, I was like, why is a guy named Alberto Fujimori, a man of Japanese descent, the president of Peru? But then my teacher told me, "Lo, much like we talked about with in the MMA video with Japanese people in Brazil, there was a large influx of Japanese people to Peru as well." But yeah, he's a Chicago White Sox fan. He plays tennis. He, of course, Peruvian football. He is a very unique individual. But I think one of the things that he will use his platform to speak um, against discrimination here in the United States, of people of color and of marginalized groups, and that's good. But again, that will put him on a collision course against certain individuals in our government that want to oppress people, you know, because of the color of their skin or their origins, So we'll see how this goes, man. But congratulations to Pope Leo the 14th. A very unique background. And hey, in my lifetime, David, Chicago, CM Punk can't be the only second city saint now. In my lifetime, Chicago has elected a pope and a president. Look at that. Both with very unique backgrounds, spanning multiple areas. You know what I mean? So, the Bulls, the Bears, the Pope, the Bulls, the Bears, the Pope. Hey, Chicago hasn't been this happy since Ditka, right? 40 years ago, the second city, the Windy City, got their Super Bowl. 40 years later, they got their Pope. The Bulls, the Bears, the Pope, the Bulls, the Bears, the Pope. The Bulls. And for those that don't know what I'm referencing, it is an old Saturday Night Live skit starring Chris Farley, of course, another Chicago native. R.I.P. Chris Farley. Chicago sports fans, because Chicago, much like New York and Boston, we take our sports teams, our sports franchises very seriously. And they would go around, and this was when Michael Jordan was, on top of the world with the Chicago Bulls, right? And they would sit around and they would eat like, typical Chicago style pizza and like typical fattening foods, and in their Chicago accent, they would talk about the various teams from Chicago, the Chicago Cubs, the Chicago Bears, and of course the Chicago Bulls. Now, you can add the Pope to to that as well. You know what I mean? So, city's not so great as far as crime. It's really suffered from deindustrialization, but at least they got the Pope. Peace, guys. See you. Yeah, David, I know the Knicks lost. What else is new? We haven't won a championship since '73. Hey, speaking of that, the Cubs had a long reign. Who can remember? Who can forget the curse of the Billy Goat? It lasted almost 100 years before they won the World Series again in 2016. You know what I mean? So